All right. So, for those who don't know who I am and who Consensus is, I'm the VP of Marketing at Consensus. And Consensus we do demo automation for pre-sales teams and really for the entire buyer journey. So we're big believers in catering to the buyer journey and kind of serving up what new buyers are demanding. And what they're demanding, as far as we can tell, is pre-sales. And if you want some evidence of that, just go onto any website you want, and marketing knows it. And you know how we know they know it? Is because the number one CTA on their website is everybody book a demo. You can put that into the chat. Thanks. So the headphones have kind of become a trademark a little bit of some of us at Consensus, and really it arose out of pure expediency because we all have kids, and we did a search on the headphones that had the best noise canceling microphone. Lots of noise canceling headphones, but we needed something to drown out the screaming and slamming on the office door, and these are what we came up with. So we all look like we're getting ready to begin our final descent into LAX. Okay, so let's talk about the SE report. The first thing to know is that you can download the report here if you want to follow along. The SE report, we're in our fourth year of the Sales Engineering Compensation Report, Compensation and Workload Report. I've got some exciting insights to share with you, as well as ways that you can use this to level up your pre-sales team. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the demographics. So just a quick overview. I'm going to breeze through a couple of these slides. You can see that the majority of respondents come from North America, but quite a few from Europe, United Kingdom. We've even got a few in South Asia, but quite a few in Australia as well. And obviously, the smaller the sample sizes get, the less reliable the data gets. But quite a few of these have plenty of data to get a reliable read on it. By the way, many of these slides are taken directly from the SE report itself. So you're seeing exactly what you'll see when you download the report. I'm glad to see it looks like some people in the chat have already downloaded the report and have got some value out of it. So I'm glad to see that. Here's a breakdown of how many years of experience. Now, for those of you who are new to the report, you're going to see a lot of distributions in this report. We don't just tell you one key takeaway that we found. We give you kind of the breakdowns. We believe pre-sales people are grown-ups and that they can handle a little bit more of the statistics behind it. And so you can see where, not just what the average and the median are, but where they fall and what the distribution looks like and what the long tail looks like, whether they're right skewed, left skewed, etc. So here you can see the percentage of our respondents that are leaders, indicated by this ring, individual contributors over here, and then distributions of a little bit finer distributions among these categories, or whether they're sales engineers, senior sales engineers, pre-sales leaders, pre-sales managers. Sometimes pre-sales rolls up to a sales leader, so we identify those, as well as we have very few account executives, and we have some questions for them as well. If you have AEs on your team, where you'd like to kind of get a better idea of how AE stats and pre-sales stats work together, refer them over, because we do have questions specifically for AEs. All right, let's look at a few of the different kinds of stats that you'll be able to find. Here's where one distribution of the number of solutions that sales engineers and leaders are supporting. You can see that the majority support one solution, but then we've got some, and it falls off. It's a right skewed graph. There's a fairly high concentration of people up around the 20 mark, even the 30 mark, and then some poor souls are supporting 45 plus solutions. And you have all of our sincere condolences. All right, so leaders and ICs report roughly twice as many generalists as specialists. So here's another area where you can break down, there's constant sort of a discussion about whether whether teams should go focusing more on generalists, more on specialists, et cetera. Very often it's a sort of a hybrid. They are a specialist in one, but they can sort of do you need to know enough to be able to sell the integration with all the other solutions, talk about how the other solutions work, etc. Uh, Here's where a major part of the report is dedicated to compensation. So here's a quick look at what OTE looks like. OTE stands for on target earnings. We go for the medians in this. And we break it down by region, mostly because the currency in which you're paid has a lot to do with the cost of living and statistically has a major impact on 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 the pay scale. So we break it down by region. They are US, UK, EU is technically Eurozone. So this isn't all of the European, all of the continent of Europe. It's specifically those that use the euro. Then there's Canada and Australia as well. Uh, so when it comes to here's a look at some of the granularity that you'll be able to see in order to benchmark your team, because that's really what we're trying to do here, right? Is we're trying to get the general benchmarks, but then we need to get more specific and see if we can match up look-alike teams to our own team to see in order to find strategies to level up. Here on a broad level, you can see on-target earnings for individual contributors and leaders. Okay, by region. Here on the left, you can see the median, the mean, the min, the max, and what the sample size is for all of these. Okay, and then you can see what the median experience is, median level years of experience for respondents in each of these different areas, whether and what percentage of them are receiving stock options, for instance, and what the quota looks like. So what percentage in each of these carry a personal quota versus a team, a personal and team, or just a team, or no quota at all. And what we found is that these have some major impacts that we had not expected, which we'll get to in a moment. All right, let's talk about a couple of key insights that we found. Tenure has a greater impact on individual contributor wages than leader wages. Okay, so the longer that you are in place as an individual contributor in your role, the more you can expect your compensation to go up. You can as a leader as well, but the rise is much more gradual. Okay, so so that's one area where the question is always do you make more money staying where you are? Do you make more money getting a new job, and what the risks that are entailed in that, or joining a different team, et cetera? And it looks like individual contributors can expect more consistent wage increases and larger wage increases over time than leaders potentially can. All right, higher earners report a lower AE to SE ratio. So this is, by the way, when we do these statistical analyses, I have a data analyst from a university in Ohio, and his name's Kevin Willardson, and he is pretty stellar at his job. He's a PhD, and he's probably considerably overqualified to do the stuff that I'm throwing at him. But these are full regression tests, and so you can be like the results that pop out. They're not as sweeping and broad as far as the differences go, but they are rock solid as far as their contribution to the result. So higher earners report a lower AE to SE ratio. Also, customer size predicts OTE for ICs, but if you're a leader, then it doesn't seem to make a difference whether you're selling into larger companies or smaller companies. It tends to stay pretty consistent. So if you're spending more of your time with the largest of the large customers, you see a slight increase on the leadership side. But if you're spending most of your time with smaller customers, that doesn't seem to have a major effect. Now, if you're an IC, that's a very different thing. If you're selling into larger enterprises or smaller enterprises, it definitely affects your compensation more than it does if you're a leader. So recently hired ICs report higher on-target earnings than their tenured counterparts, while the opposite is true of leaders. So people who are entering, this is something that is consistent with last year's findings as well, by the way. Those who are entering their roles newly tend to be commanding higher salaries than people who have stayed for a longer period of time, and that can be a cause of some concern for people who have a lot of tenure in their position, and we should all kind of be aware of what's going on there. But the opposite is true of leaders. So new leaders are not necessarily making, commanding huge pay bumps compared to their more tenured counterparts. All right, stock options. Stock options are now a thing for ICs as well as leaders. But that appears to be a fairly new phenomenon. So if you've negotiated your compensation or joined a company within the last 4 to 6 years, you're much, much more likely to have stock options as part of your compensation plan than if you, say, joined your position between 7 or more years ago. And that's what we can see down here at the bottom. So with your time at your current position, you're much more likely to have stock options up here in this range than if you've been in your position for longer. So once again, maybe time to renegotiate salary for some ICs. And this is true for leaders and leaders, less true for leaders, but much more true for individual contributors. Okay, so personal quotas. Let's talk about this for a minute. Dun, 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 dun. So I know that this is an utter pariah for many of us who are in the pre-sales world, but I'm going to beg your indulgence for a minute. I want you to keep an open mind for just a sec because we had a full session on this at the last Demo Fest, and what we found, which was surprising to me, was that personal quotas don't just predict higher OTE. You can expect, salespeople have been carrying a bag for ages, and they make a lot of money. So we expect, it's reasonable to expect that carrying a personal quota is going to mean that you potentially make more money if you hit your quota, right? That's the whole idea behind it. But what we were surprised to find was that carrying a personal quota also predicts a higher base salary for sales engineers specifically. So this is not, as I say, it's not something that we expected to find or looked for. It just came out of the data as we analyzed it, and then we started checking around, and anecdotally, it's what we're finding as well, where some sales engineering teams are adopting a personal quota, and that anecdotally, in the teams that we've talked to, they've reported it as an overwhelmingly positive experience. Now, I know that many people in this audience are new leaders or looking to become leaders. This is something that we should really be aware of because the landscape for pre-sales may be changing over time. And this also plays, by the way, into the evergreen topic of how pre-sales gets a seat at the table. How do you change the perception of pre-sales from cost center to revenue center? How do you revolutionize, disrupt in such a fashion that pre-sales gets more of a voice when it comes to budget, resources, all of those things that are necessary to level up? Well, here is one major factor that we're finding contributes to this. All right. Here's one that we're going to spend a little bit of time on because it takes a little bit to unpack the spaghetti bowl, but I'm going to walk everybody through it to explain what exactly this graphic indicates. And some of you may have been through this before with the data we had from last year, but we'll go ahead and walk through it again so that everybody gets a good idea of what's going on here. So up here, we can see that this graph is called top functions ranked in order of time spent versus the order of impact. Here's what we're talking about. First, we took all of these activities. And we asked all of our survey participants to rank them in order of how much time they absorb in their week. Okay, so in a week, the thing that absorbs the most time for most people is technical demos, followed by intro demos, POCs, then discovery, and on down the list. We have planning and architecting solutions, consulting calls, RFPs, product knowledge improvement, prospect support, other, and then implementing pre-sales tools got even less time than other. Okay. Then we ask people to rank them, these same activities, in order of the impact that they have on the bottom line. In other words, which of these activities would have the greatest impact, is specifically the question we asked, which of these activities would have the greatest impact on your success if you could spend more time on them? So, in summary, on the left is where are we spending our time? On the right, where should we be spending our time? And this is according to pre-sales pros, not according to us. Uh, Ellie, this is so we had a little bit of a snafu in the very first 1.1 report that we released back in June because it had the old data on it. So if you downloaded it immediately, we encourage you to download the newest version because it has the updated data on it. But we corrected it pretty quick, but you may have seen the old data first. Now, let's look at what this means. The obvious question is, where are the mismatches, right? And nothing lines up this year. Nothing lines up exactly right according to the pre-sales pros, right? Um, I'll answer that about the intro demo in just a minute, Yudi. But let's talk about so technical demos. You can see that we're spending more time on those than their impact maybe would suggest we should. Discovery, we're spending far less time than its impact would suggest we should be spending, right? So here we see some of the larger mismatches. Most of these are within one or two slots. Okay, we're not pre-sales departments aren't in a complete disarray. We know more or less what's important and where we should be spending our time. We're aiming to get those right, right? Planning and architecting solutions. You can see the we should be spending a little bit more time there. Consulting calls, spending more time there. POCs, we should be spending less time there than we are, according to these folks, right? According to the pre-sales industry. Prospect support, we should be spending a little more time. And there are some other things that we have. All right, now let's start to look at some of the real problem children. RFPs. RFPs, we're spending quite a bit more time than their impact suggests we should be spending. That's a perennial complaint. That's not a surprise to anybody, I don't think. Implementing pre-sales tools. Our respondents seem to think that there are some tools that can really, really help us to level up our pre-sales game. I would second that, but I work for consensus, so take that with a grain of salt. But I'm going to testify that you can make some pretty serious impacts if you implement the right tools. Now, product knowledge improvement. Here's something that we are not spending nearly enough time on, and it could have a major effect on our success rates if we spent more time leveling up product knowledge in our teams. And then we have the rogue outlier that screws everything up, which is intro demos. And you're right, Mark. It's a huge opportunity in AI for RFP response. Very cool. Now let's talk about intro demos for a minute. We did not give a major specification on this, but I can tell you that in most of the teams that we talk to, the intro demo is usually, let me give you a scenario of the awful buyer journey. Okay. The scenario goes like this. Prospect goes to the website, says, okay, I think this is one that might be down. I'm investigating solutions. These might be part of my 3 that I bring back, but I need a demo. Okay, book a demo at the top, click on it. Did they get a demo? No. They get a form. Okay, necessary evil. They have to contact me and they're going to abuse my inbox, but I'll fill out the form. Okay, now do I get a demo? No. Now I get an SDR. And the SDR is going to get on the horn with me and they're going to qualify me. Are you the decision maker? No, I'm investigating for a panel of this. Okay, can we get the decision maker on the phone? Let's light that hoop on fire. And the prospect is either going to fight their way through this, leap through the hoops of fire, or lie in order to get their way through the SDR. Okay, so let's say they get through the SDR. Now they get a demo, right? Oh, no, they don't. Now they get sales rep. And the sales rep is going to talk to them about high level outcomes and more qualification. And at the end of that, if they satisfy the sales rep, now it's time to book time on the SE's calendar. Our statistics tell us that the time between the time they ask for a demo and the time they actually get one is on average about a week, 5 business days. Some people extend out much, much longer than that. It's worth benchmarking in your own org if you have not already. Find out how much time customers have to wait before they get a demo from the time they ask for one. And then they get into the room with the SE. And the SE wants to do a good demo. And so of course, these SEs are well trained and they're going to try and do discovery. And the prospect is going to say, I am all questioned out. Just show me the software. Just show me the standard demo, right? So that's the intro demo. Now, very often, people SEs have to do that before they can earn a discovery call and then after the discovery call, they'll do this technical demo, right? This deep dive technical demo. Now, it may be different in your organization, but very often that's the scenario that we hear. Okay, so when we talk about intro demos, that's just a little bit of context, maybe what we're talking about, buttonology, acquainting people with the overall layout of the software, that sort of thing, before we can get into differentiators between competitors and the deep dive questions that the prospect is going to have. All right, so that's the rogue. That's the outlier. It takes up more time than anything else except for technical demos on average across most teams. And it is above only RFPs as its impact on your overall success. Now, we're not doing this because we love repetitive intro demos, right? These are up to this point, these are things that have been more or less necessary, right? You can't go straight to letter E. You have to start with A and build your way there. But there are better ways to do it, and this is why consensus actually exists. But intro demos are the major rogue outlier. So, ways that you can use this in your team. One is to conduct a survey yourself and find out where you're spending your time versus where everybody agrees or the consensus says you should be spending your time. I highly recommend going through many of these questions in your own organization. But if you want to use the report, let's go back one. Let's look at the right side here where it's where we're looking at the difference. Okay. When we look at the difference, what we're doing is subtracting the position on one position from the other position. If it comes out at a negative number, that means pre-sales industry pros as a whole are saying spend less time on this if you can at all manage it. If it comes out to a positive number, pre-sales industry as a whole is saying these will have a greater impact on your success. So ideally, minimize the negative outcomes, the negative results, maximize the positive outcomes, and you're going to see a major move in your success rates in your team. That's what that chart means. Any questions on that before we get going? We'll have a Q&A at the end, but if there's anything that's not clear here, feel free to drop it into the chat. Clear as mud. Everybody good with this? Okay. Let's jump to what is going to make your life better as a pre-sales pro. We asked, what changes would have the biggest impact on your work life? All right. And then we gave a few options. Number one is to make available to pre-sales the same perks and incentives available to sales. That's a kind of a perennial complaint, right? Those of you who've been in pre-sales for a long time are going to have heard that one many times before. Also, reduce repetitive tasks so that my team can be more strategic and consultative and creative at work. And those two dwarf everything else. Okay, leaders actually favor the second over the first. It's not necessarily surprising. This is much more of a strategic move. But when it comes to ICs, there's a big, people notice. We all notice what the mismatch is between sales incentives and pre-sales incentives. But once again, some of that comes back to maybe changing how we compensate in pre-sales, because sales does carry fairly significant responsibility in carrying that back. All right, next question. And I'm going to ask everybody to drop an answer into the chat here. Would you say pre-sales influence versus sales has increased or decreased relative to sales over the last year? Anybody? Increased? Pre-sales. All right. Universally increased. And if you had increased dramatically, wow, that's really fascinating. Um, I will say that uh, our past reports have supported that. In this latest report, relative to sales, pre-sales influence overall decreased is what most people reported. So if it's increasing at your organization, you're in good shape. At many organizations, especially as the economy has slowed, it seems as though from the data that emphasis is shifting back to sales versus this rapid rise in pre-sales that we had seen. It's still rising, by the way, it's still rising, but it's slowing. Okay, it's slowing year over year, and we can see that here. That growth of pre-sales influence has slowed compared to previous years. It's had this rapid rise, but as the economy slowed down, some of the emphasis is shifting back over to sales. Uh, let's see. The influence of recognition are two different things that should not be in the same report. Influence and recognition. Oh, maybe you're right. We should have a look at that. Feel free to drop your reasoning behind that into the chat. I'd be interested to see it. All right. So next, uh, how I want you to everybody to think about this for a minute. But how can you increase the influence of pre-sales in your organization? What are some things that you can do to increase the influence of the organization, the influence of the pre-sales department at the organization? Well, here's one that stuck out. There are a couple of things that statistically seem to contribute. All right. And there's a whole session on this at DFX London, which we just had recently, on ways to bring, don't focus on getting a seat at the table. You bring your own seat and the ways to bring your own seat to the table. And we'll be discussing that actually at the Leadership Symposium with PSC next week. But one of the ways that you can there are several predictors of what increases pre-sales influence. One of them is lower demo lag times. Okay, so if you can get demos more quickly to prospects, then that actually predicts more influence of pre-sales at the organization by a significant amount. All right, so and this comes back to the narrative that you sometimes find where pre-sales is because it relies so heavily in the past it's relied so heavily on live interactions and only live interactions. Everybody's held hostage to a calendar. Now, if you can break free of that, if you can automate some of that, if you can train up different team members in order to get those demos faster to where people don't feel like they're held hostage to a calendar, then you're going to find that your influence within the organization rises according to the numbers. All right, let's talk about unqualified demos, because there's a reason we put everybody through these qualification processes, right? And that is that even with these qualification processes, 30% of the demos that we do in a pre-sales are identified as unqualified by pre-sale by the industry as a whole. Okay, and this is what that distribution looks like. Here's the median: 30% are unqualified, and 25% of respondents said that half of their demos are unqualified. Right, here's the distribution. I mean, it goes up to fairly high numbers sometimes. So that produces an incredible amount of drag on the pre-sales team. As a matter of fact, it will, as I'll show you later, it contributes to burnout. It contributes to all kinds of things that are dragging down the sales process. Obviously, you're spending time on things that you shouldn't be spending time on, and it's a major efficiency hit to the team. All right, let's jump to the next one. More unqualified demos predict greater misallocation of time spent on intro demos. Okay, so now there's chicken and egg, cause and effect, causality, things here that you can look at. But essentially, those who spend more of their time on intro demos report a higher percentage of those demos that are unqualified. That's what this slide means. ICs are overburdened with unqualified demos report lower influence and recognition. relative to sales. If you can change the qualification strategy, which can be tough, but there are ways to do it. Hit me up. There are ways to do it. If you can change the qualification strategy, then and reduce the number of unqualified demos, then you can actually increase pre-sales influence at the org. And we're going to breeze through the last of this, which is we're talking about burnout for a minute. And this was a major part of our um, research this year. And we're just going to go through a couple of slides. So, can you buy your way out of burnout? That's the first question. Answer: everybody in the slide in the chat. No, you cannot. Nearly 22% of ICs and 31% of leaders report feeling at least some symptoms of burnout, and there is no correlation between lower burnout and higher OTE. That's kind of a big deal. So if work sucks, more money doesn't make it, doesn't fix it. It doesn't fix it. All right, there are many causes of burnout. There are low work-life balance. The hours worked contribute. Crunch weeks, the frequency of crunch weeks contribute. Lack of influence and recognition, misallocation of time and resources, contract size, and unqualified demos are the major contributors that we found. Misallocating time and resources. So the greater the mismatch between those two columns, the more likely you are to feel burnout. Also, unqualified demos. This is crazy. Just a 10% increase in the number of unqualified demos is the same as permanently adding 10% to your work week, 4 hours to your work week permanently. So you're permanently going to go from 44 hours to 48 hours a week, right? That's what unqualified demos do to the burnout of your team. ICs are looking for recognition for the value that they bring to the sales cycle, and what this indicates is that those pre-sales teams that are feeling undervalued relative to sales report higher levels of burnout, is what this means. But if they feel closer to the level of sales, then they report much less burnout. And it doesn't take like a full, leveling. It just increase the profile of pre-sales relative to sales. Maybe talk a little bit more about your sales engineers when a deal gets won, right? It doesn't take a ton, and it massively alleviates burnout. Pressure of large deals is a predictor of burnout. So if you're working on the bigger ones, you're a whale hunter, that can get fatiguing over time. All right, and then we have some couple quick stats on demo automation. Majority of organizations are automating some demo processes. You can see what the distribution looks like there. Firms who automate a portion of the demo process report less burnout, and it helps to support higher AE to SE ratios, which is another major portion from a C-suite perspective of how you measure a high performance pre-sales team. All right, and it also frees up ICs to focus more on customized in-depth demos. So when we measure how many hours per demo organizations are spending, and with demo automation, they're able to spend more time on those demos than without automation, where they have earned less time with the customer. All right, and we're going to go ahead and shift through to the end here. Here's where you can participate in the 2024 report, and go ahead and scan that if you would like to click in and participate in next year's report. We're currently gathering responses for that. We're just about to close that up, though, so there's only going to be a couple more days to participate, especially if you're in Europe. I encourage you to participate because we'd love to increase the sample size down there.